If you are to be successful in business, if you are to persevere long enough in the face of all of the adversity that you will undoubtedly encounter, then you're going to need a lot of self-belief. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about how to build self-belief, what belief is, how to deal with those difficult situations, and the mindset that allows you to navigate through any metaphorical moment of chaos. I used to be absolutely terrified of public speaking. I remember when I was 14 years old, going up on that stage in school, and they'd given me this piece of paper to read off. And I was so scared that my hands were shaking like this so violently that I couldn't read the paper. So I just made the words up, said them, and then ran off the stage. A decade later, I'm speaking 50 weeks a year in arenas. And the thing that had changed within me was that I had built such an undeniable stack of evidence about my own performance on stage, but really the evidence that would counteract the negative evidence of what will go wrong if I fail, to the point that I developed a sense of calm before I walked on stage. The only objective change was more experience, and that experience had created more evidence. And the same story applies for the self-belief that I had. When I was younger, because of the absence of my parents, because my mum and father were away working most of the time and weren't there from about roughly the age of 10, I conducted lots of experiments that were entrepreneurial. I started selling things around the house. And I got information back from those experiments that confirmed to me that if I needed to make money, I knew how to find a way. And that when I had an idea, it was possible for me to see that idea through. That to me is the reason why I had self-belief at a young age and why I became entrepreneur, because I started stacking that evidence early. And the thing is, some of our beliefs are incredibly stubborn. Some of them date right back to when we were younger, and they're things that happened or experiences that gave us evidence that we subjectively interpreted as being true. So in order to change any stubborn belief you have, what you need to do is put yourself in situations that counteract those beliefs. There are 4 factors that determine whether we accept a new belief about ourselves or a new belief about the world. The first factor is what your current beliefs are. The second factor is your confidence in your current beliefs. The third factor is what the new evidence that you're being presented with is. And the fourth factor is your confidence in that new evidence. We're much more likely to believe new evidence when it comes from a source we trust. So if you and your friend have 95% of the same existing beliefs, you're much more likely to accept a new belief from them. And we see this a lot in politics. If you're on the right side of politics, you're much more likely to accept a new belief from someone on the right side of politics. If you're on the left, you're much more likely to accept a belief from someone on your side. The key to changing your beliefs, especially your self-belief, is putting yourself in a situation where you'll be confronted with powerful counteracting evidence about the limiting belief you have about yourself. And for me, that occurred by going on stage over and over and over again and proving to myself with undeniable first-party evidence that the consequence of failure was minuscule and that I had the capabilities, if I trusted myself, to achieve success on stage. There are 3 zones as it relates to belief creation. The first zone is your comfort zone. That is where all your current existing beliefs live. Outside of that, you have your growth zone. This is the area where you'll come across evidence that contradicts what you currently believe and result in growth. And outside of that, if you go a little bit further outside of your zone of comfort, I call this your panic zone. This is where things are so intimidating and so difficult that the chances are if you go there, it will negatively reinforce your current limiting beliefs, i.e. it will knock your confidence and set you back further. The key is to keep yourself in that growth zone, where new beliefs and therefore new growth can be achieved. We are governed by what we believe. And the truth as it relates to being an entrepreneur or anybody that's pursuing anything in our lives is that everything we do feeds into this instruction manual that governs our life. I call this your self-story. It is a combination of everything you've done that you've observed yourself. Remember, the most compelling evidence of all is evidence that has been observed through first-party senses that you trust and believe. This is why taking someone who believes the Earth is flat to a NASA laboratory and showing them pictures of the Earth isn't enough. It wasn't through their first senses and they don't trust the source. Maybe if you took them up into space and showed them planet Earth from space, maybe, just maybe, then they would change their belief. But it's going to require that first-party evidence. And if you think about in your own life, you're building first-party evidence about yourself in everything you do. And that is writing a line into your self-story every day with every action you take, even when nobody's watching. And that self-story is an instruction manual that will dictate how you behave in the future and what you think of yourself. And I interviewed Chris Eubank Jr., who's a world championship boxer. I wanted to understand the mentality of a world championship boxer who's got to get in the ring and fight somebody for 12 rounds. What is the mindset he needs to adopt? And he said something very interesting to me. He says, if I'm at home alone and nobody's there, and I've told myself I'm going to run 10 kilometers on the treadmill, and I get to 9 kilometers and I get a bad, painful cramp in my leg, I will limp the last kilometer because I can't let the demons in. And what he's saying there is that if he gives up when no one's watching at 9 kilometers, then what's he going to do in the 12th round of a fight in front of 50 or 60,000 people in an arena? He's going to know in his head that he's somebody who gives up when things get hard. That's going to be permanently etched into his self-story. The truth here is that the commitments we keep to others, but also to ourselves when nobody's watching, pay into the narrative that dictates how we live our lives. Everything we do and don't do has an impact on the future of everything we do. And this is why it's so incredibly important, in order to shape positive beliefs about yourself, to try and keep the commitments you make to yourself. And when you don't, because it's not always going to be possible, to be honest with yourself about why you didn't and take responsibility for that. It's been clearly shown in multiple studies that people with a high internal locus of control, where they believe they can control their outcomes, are more successful in both business and in life. Believing you have control over your situations is an integral skill that will serve you well, especially when things get difficult in business. Because in business, one thing you can guarantee for sure, irrespective of how smart or intelligent or well prepared you are, is that crisis will undeniably at some point show up in your business and in your life. That crisis is inevitable. But how you respond to the crisis is yet to be determined. That is something you can control. I always think in business, you typically have 3 types of people when things get hard. If you imagine right now that this room was on fire, the first type of person is usually so paralyzed by fear that it results in inaction. The second type of person is so panicked by fear that they're screaming and spreading stress, which is contagious in a professional environment. And the third type of person is so aware that the room is metaphorically on fire that they don't even need to focus everybody's attention on that. They're using 100% of their available time and attention on figuring out how to get themselves and other people out of the room. They default to focusing on the things that they can control. That is an entrepreneur. That is an entrepreneur's mindset. That is somebody who has that bias towards focusing on the controllables, and their outcomes are significantly more likely to be successful in the context of any professional chaos. Having an internal locus of control, a high sense of personal autonomy and responsibility is an entrepreneurial mindset. And that's something that we can all build evidence towards achieving. I've got an exercise for you here as it relates to building your self-belief. First, I want you to take pen and paper and write down a limiting belief that you know you have about yourself, an area of your life where you might be lacking in confidence. And then I want you to make a commitment to me. I want you to write down on a piece of paper exactly how you're going to step out of your comfort zone and put yourself in a situation where that limiting belief will be counteracted with new evidence. And at the bottom of this piece of paper, I want you to write this sentence: I promise that I will take this action to step out of my comfort zone. And then I want you to write a yes or no tick box, tick the yes box, and sign the piece of paper. This exercise of asking yourself if you'll do something on a piece of paper in a binary yes or no way has been proven to drastically increase your probability of actually doing it. This is called the question behavior effect. And by signing it, you're making a commitment to, most importantly, yourself, but also to me.